Okay, everyone. So, welcome to another XYZ workshop slash portfolio review. We're doing things slightly different this evening. We're joined by Chris Rumsey, who is Associate Lead Asset Artist at 1010 Games. And Chris is going to be reviewing a number of portfolios and I guess answering any questions people might have about portfolios in general or indeed the industry, as he's just said. So, Chris, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much. Let me get my notes up. So hello, yeah, I'm Chris Rumsey, Associate Lead Asset Artist. That's basically sort of a step up to becoming a lead at some point, because at 1010 Games we've been around for about 18 months now. So there's me, there's my if you ever want me. Here's my experience as well. So I've worked on quite a few Lego titles, on all different platforms from I think Wii U all the way up to like Switch, PS5, Xbox, everything in between. And I'm now at 1010 Games, where we're working on Funko Fusion. We've signed an exclusive partnership with Funko to develop games strictly for them for current gen consoles. Hopefully coming soon, TM. And then I've also had like tons of experience working with like license holders. So like obviously Lego with DC, Lucasfilm, Marvel, BBC, Fox, you name it. I've probably worked with them at some point. And then also with my relationship with Lego, we released a Lego set that I created and designed. The Blue Milk Luke is probably what I'm most known for online. If you've ever seen turned into a bit of a meme, and then Lego made it into an official set, which is really, really cool. That's like my proudest achievement ever. So that's me. That's my background. I've been in the industry nearly 8 years now, and I've been a lead for, I guess, just about 6 months or so now in general. And I've built the team up at 1010, hired everyone in the team, including Roxy, as you may be aware, and a couple of other girls that we have in the team as well. So this sort of first section of the talk is kind of me just going through things that are like really important to me, really important to like seeing in portfolios and like junior artists, or just like key reminders that I really want you to sort of remember. So the first thing is proportions and blockouts. I block out basically absolutely everything, no matter what it is. If it's just a small prop or if I'm doing a full environment, I block the whole lot out. Especially in stylized as well, I block out sort of odd proportions or like areas I want to exaggerate, or like you see on the right, just like what key details I really want to stick out. And I break down what are those important details. But I also use the block out to keep my high poly on track. So for example, I've got a very odd shape where I know this whole sort of like computer system needs to fit together, but I know it's going to animate and rotate, and I kind of need to keep myself on track. So I just use boxes all the time. It's something I always say that everything in game art is just boxes and cylinders. It really is. I make everything out of boxes and cylinders, or beveled boxes if you want to be fancy as well. And then as I'm going along, I refine my block out. So if I'm getting along and I think, oh, the proportions aren't quite right, I will sometimes just go back to that initial block out I've got and just test it there before going back, because wrong proportions will just instantly throw off a piece. It becomes very distracting. As soon as you notice it, you can't get rid of it. And if something hasn't got the right proportions and weight to it, it's so obvious. So sort of leading on from that is something I love and it's so key is silhouettes. So silhouettes in general, it can make the most basic of assets interesting. So for example, we've got like a cereal box, but just the silhouette itself, you've got all these nice cool angles and cut-ins, and even on the right where we've got like a very stylized sort of saxophone, they've really sort of exaggerated the end there. Even on the silhouette, that's like exaggerated so well, but you can still exactly tell what that asset is, even from the silhouette. So we've got nice angles, lines are so key, exaggerating the areas, and then look at the bends, for example, on this bottom example here. So we've got a very weighty asset on top here, and it's bending in the middle, but more importantly, if you look down at sort of where the posts are as well, where those angles are creating almost like a weighted down on there. And then those lines are carrying all the way through to the front, it's sloping down and it's showing weight. I love seeing like weight behind assets. I think it makes everything so much better. It feels so right. And these are very what I call sort of like subconscious details. You wouldn't immediately look at these sort of things, but in your head you would recognize these things and everything would just feel right for the asset. And then this is my most important one. This is the one that I bang on about all the time. This is the number one thing I see in every portfolio. And now that we're in this current gen, it's something that like I just don't want to see so much in portfolios, and that's circles and bevels and curves in general. So I just mocked up this really quick example here of like how I sort of approach how many sides to circles and curves that I do. In general, I always try and step down. As we get smaller, we have less and we have less. As we get smaller, we get less. And again, less and less, less. That seems like the most obvious thing in the world, but it's so easy to get sidetracked and completely like just don't do that basically. You might just, for example, create a cylinder that's 16 sides and you're in the flow of it, and then you'll duplicate it and then you'll scale it up, but you haven't increased the sides. So then when you come to your final low poly, all of a sudden your bigger shapes have got all these faceted edges. That's something that I just see in almost every junior portfolio that I've reviewed or any application I've seen. So you don't want to fall into this trap. So another question I like to ask is about the bevels as well. Do I need bevels? So for example, I've got a much larger sort of curve over here where I've got more beveled edges. I've got a slightly smaller curve on here, so I've got less. And then up to here, I've just got a box. So at this point, I'm asking myself the question, am I relying on my normal map or am I relying more on geometry? If the bevel's really small, then I just go straight for the normal map. Or I'll use a bevel and maybe I'll exaggerate that bevel out a little bit more just to make it obvious that there's supposed to be some sort of like nice beveled or smooth edge here. And that's what I always try and consider. And then you've got to ask yourself certain questions like, is this a hero prop or a hero asset? If it is, then you can, give yourself a bigger budget for that sort of thing. But at the same time, it's also just thinking optimally. If you've got loads and loads of small details on an object, does it really need to be that high res? They can be a lot lower res and you can have more of them in general. As long as those bigger curves, those bigger bevels, those bigger parts of the asset have that level of geometry it needs, overall it will look better. So again, another sort of example here, just looking at curves in general. We've got sort of a nice sort of ratio going down in here. But if you look on the side view of the wireframe, we're just stepping down on our bevels as we get smaller and smaller and smaller. Again, it seems super simple, super basic, but it's something that's missed quite a lot of the time. It's very distracting, and as I said, sort of like on current gen now where we're at, we can kind of avoid that and go for a much bigger budget. So then moving on to something that is also super important is color. I always find that color can really make or break a piece. And it's also how you grab my attention. If you're applying to me, I'm looking at your portfolio, you want to grab my attention straight away, and color's something you can do with that instantly. So here's an example of just an environment I knocked up not too long ago, and you can see the color is bursting out from the center. I want to draw your focus to the center of this piece and eventually draw your eyesight out into all the details that I have going on around the edges, around the back, or around the sides. You're immediately drawn here, and then you're pushed out here. And you can use lighting to help that as well. It doesn't have to just be the color. But then you try and keep your color palettes nice and balanced. So I've got some of my reds, my oranges, my browns, all sort of in that sort of same family of colors, which will really help guide your piece and won't have any too distracting colors, or go the opposite way and have everything sort of like at a mid-range. You want to try and avoid that. You want areas of key interest, sort of like the bright reds, the bright sort of like beige and yellows of the floor, and then sort of keeping some other sort of colors quite darker that are less of a focus. So you want to draw the eye to what you want. And then I sort of dig down. Personally, I dig down a lot into traditional art. This is one of my favorite artists, and just look at how they use light and color. You see that they're coming along and dragging your attention up in your focus, looking at the key areas. And even on here, an example here of where you've got all the sort of similar colors in that color palette of like the reds and the yellows and the oranges, but they've just brightened up just the center where they want your focus to be. So it all sits within the same sort of family of these warm colors, but they're drawing your attention, drawing your focus in here. And it doesn't just have to be traditional art. You can look at modern art, you can look at color grading. There's so many useful tools and resources out there, but I just think it's so important to sort of ingrain yourself in the art world and look at the techniques that they're already doing, because the answers for all of your questions are already out there. You just need to find those answers for yourself. So moving on, reference. This one will be hammered into you, I'm sure, absolutely loads by this point. But there was a couple of really important things I picked up that I want to share. So PureRef, you're probably already very, very familiar with PureRef. It's an amazing tool. Easily grab all of your reference together, group it up. Yeah, I imagine you all know pretty much what that is. But then one thing that I was introduced to on Twitter, which I never considered before, is a personal Discord server. So I have my own, it's just me in there, but I have everything broken down into categories for different projects. It doesn't matter where I am, if I'm on my phone or if on my work laptop or if I'm at home, I can just add reference in there and it's wherever I am all the time. I can snap a photo, chuck it in this Discord server. It's there for me when I get home. And then I can just organize everything. You can put notes in there, you can put videos in there, images, absolutely everything. It's really, really good. So reference, you already know, you need to look at sort of as much as possible, but I also suggest looking at indirect reference. Now, what I mean by that is, say, for example, you're working on sort of like a retro 80s prop, like a stereo, for example. I would then go out and look at what other like TVs from that era or like, say, Japanese products from that era, what sort of materials are they using, what sort of colors are they using, what sort of palettes are they using, the text, the fonts, everything that they're using, bring that into your piece and it will make the piece so much better. I did a piece a little while ago based on a computer that I saw in the background of the TV show Loki. It was originally on my list of props that I wanted to make. I decided not to make it at first because I'd seen loads of people had made that retro computer, but I saw it pop up in the background with like they'd completely changed the style of it. There wasn't too many reference photos of it, so what I did is I just looked at everything from that same era. I saw that they were using some Apple products, so I looked at those products. I looked at what would go with that. I looked at what materials like brass and nickel, lots of that, put it all into that one piece, and then suddenly you've got a very believable piece. And then finally, this is more of a personal thing, but I've found since sort of like looking into film photography, how important that has become to my renders and how much it has improved me. So there's tons of terms that you'll have seen going through sort of like if you use Marmoset or maybe use Unreal, using the cameras in there. I remember it was a couple of weeks ago, someone presenting was talking about cinematic cameras. You'll of course know depth of field, things like focus distance, film backs will be in there, focal length, rule of thirds. And you'll notice these. This is in Marmoset. This is in Unreal. You'll start seeing all these terms, and I think it's really important to actually understand what these are doing rather than just necessarily toggling the sliders till it looks just about right. You know, a lot of these work in tandem with each other, like depth of field and focus distance and aperture. All of these work with each other. So if you actually know what they're doing, you'll find this is much more easier. You can fine tune everything. And especially with depth of field, I like to use depth of field to call out details, not necessarily just to look nice. Sometimes it can get very distracting if you've got it on too harsh or if your distance isn't quite right. It does become very distracting. But a lot of these will just help you compose your scenes better. There's the rule of thirds. It's a very simple, traditional way of compositing a scene. You don't have to always stick to that, but it will give you a really good starting point. Originally, I was working on a project where I was rendering things out, and I decided just to jump back into this, and it helped me loads. I just found like quick YouTube videos. There's absolutely tons on there on film or digital photography about this. I just watched a quick 10-15 minute video on like what these things actually are. Like film backs are a much more physical thing in the film world than they are in digital, and you can just understand all of these details and these terms, line, form, shape, texture. The whole lot is so good to learn. Like as I was saying earlier, like lines draw your attention, adding cool angles, all this sort of stuff will really start to enhance your work. So some portfolio tips. So this is kind of going on into the main part of the talk. I was originally mentored by Wyeth Johnson, who was at Epic at the time. This is probably about 10 years ago. He taught me loads of portfolio stuff, and I find it to be like really harsh. I kind of thought that doesn't seem quite right. However, I found since then he's absolutely correct. So there's a few things that he went over. The first thing was you have about 10 to 15 seconds to impress me. Even at a really small studio that we are at 1010, I could easily get 50 to 60 applicants for any job role. In environment art, that was well over 100. That's 100 people you're vying for the attention for. So immediately you have to grab me. You make me want to go through your portfolio. It sounds harsh, but it is true. So I always say, cut down your portfolio. Just show me your best pieces. Even say work in progress stuff. It starts asking a lot of questions of like, how long has it taken for them to get here? You know, do they create one bad piece for every 3 good pieces? You want to eliminate those questions and just say, yeah, this is all of my best work. Don't give me any excuse to doubt that. And then these are the questions that I ask. So I ask, what is your process? I love seeing what people's like what tools you've been using, what workflows you've been developing, all of that background work. I love seeing that along with your final piece, not just the final render. I want to know how you've done this, what kind of artist you are. When I hire artists, I'm not just going for the art, but I'm also hiring the artist. That's very, very, very important for our studio and our culture. And I want you to answer them easily for me. You know, are you ticking all of my boxes for this role? This is all things you should be considering when you're submitting your portfolio for a job application. Look at the job description. Are you ticking all those boxes in your portfolio or even your cover letter? You know, list your key skills. What experiences have you got? Do you know texel density inside and out? Are you really good at UV mapping? You know, have you done like cloth dynamics before, anything like that? All that sort of stuff in your cover letter just builds you as an artist, paints that picture for me, and it really helps. And of course, tailor your portfolio. Are you going for just a stylized role? Then maybe tailor your portfolio just to stylized, or likewise for hyper realistic. You know, if you're using something like ArtStation, you can hide your projects. You can just archive them. You don't have to delete them, and you can sort of just change up your portfolio depending on who you're applying to, and then show your relevant skills in your portfolio. So, like, I love seeing wireframes and UVs. I always think UVing is a skill that I absolutely love. I love UVing. I'm one of the very few people that actually do, but it's so important to me for things like texel density. You know, I don't want to be chucking all my textures into the game at 4K resolution because we just don't have that sort of budget. And likewise, in the future, you could be working at a multi-platform studio where you've got to go from Switch all the way up to PS5, and you're going to have these optimization techniques. Obviously, a lot of this will get taught as you're in a junior role, but it's always going to put you in a better position if you can show you've got the basic understanding of this. You know, like collision or LODs, or even now like moving into sort of nanite. You know, mipping for textures, knowing all about that. It only boosts you as an artist and as a portfolio, and makes you more hireable. And then the last bit, this was more personal for me, but for apply early. If you're a student, you know, and you're coming to the end of your studies in a few months, start having a look and applying for jobs now. Like the worst that's going to happen is they're just going to say no. But some application processes have taken months. I went through one at Rare that I think took 3 to 4 months. You know, by that time you could have finished your studies and then you want to walk straight into a job. That's what I did before my original junior role at TT Games. I was applying very early, and they took me on as soon as I was done. You might as well get in there early because everyone's going to start applying, you know, as soon as those studies are done. So get in there early, give your portfolio a boost, and make yourself the most hireable person you can be. So finally, the portfolio reviews, the exciting bit, or the bit you're dreading. I don't know. So we got any questions or anything so far? Just while I'm loading up the portfolios, are we all good?
There are some questions if you want to take some of them now, or if you want to do the portfolios and come to them at the end. It's
Oh,
really up to
I'll
you.
take a couple now. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me see. The first question is from Melissa. How does your day look like as an associate lead? So what's your typical day? Do they teach
Yeah,
you how to
cool.
be a lead? Do you have tasks that you need to
Yes.
fulfill to prove that you can be a lead?
Yeah, so I'm really lucky in the studio and that I get so much support as a lead. My team is very, very new. I have 3 junior women. And so this is kind of why I'm in that associate lead role, not lead, is because this is kind of a trial period where we have sort of very strict criteria for me of like goals I need to achieve. I actually plan out every day in my notebook, so I can literally just tell you things that I do. So for this morning, for example, I quickly reviewed all the work that's been in recently, gave a little bit of feedback out to the team, and then I had some time for myself just to start making one of the assets that I was working on. And then after that, I had a couple of meetings like kickoffs for levels, and a little bit of feedback meetings. I have a lot of say in the current art style of the game, so I have meetings specifically about that. But most important to me is I still have time to be making art. I still have time to keep myself relevant in the art world as well. I always set myself time now, just for myself, just to review things, just to go over things and organize work, sprints. We call it sprints, by the way, if you don't know what it is. Sprints are 2 weeks worth of work. We sort of set estimates for everything into those 2 weeks, and that's what we get completed in those 2 weeks. So everything gets costed up properly. You know, we shouldn't have to crunch or do overtime or anything like that. We take responsibility for our tasks. Hope that
Awesome.
answers it.
Cool. Yeah, that's really cool. Do you want to take one more question and then maybe do some portfolios?
Yeah, I'll take one more. Yeah.
So next question I think is from me. Yeah. So what are some of the main issues? Obviously, you covered a lot of really useful information there
Yeah.
about portfolios and so on. What do you think maybe are the most common, frequently things that you see that are kind of like problems, particularly for graduate portfolios?
Yeah, particularly for I always call it like topology balancing. So there'll be really small areas of a model that will have absolutely tons of detail, but the larger overall silhouette of the model will have a lot of faceted edges where you've really dug into the details, but you've kind of forgotten about the larger piece at whole, and you've ended up with a model that might be 12K tries, but could be cut down a lot more than that and look exactly the same. That's one of the things I see, and then also texel density with UVs. I love seeing really high res textures, and a lot of renders that I do see do have kind of slightly blurry textures or areas of the model that don't have the same texel density. So you've got one area that's really, really high res and another area that, really isn't.
Okay.
And then lastly, just the renders themselves, use a lot of your time to show off your models. You spent ages working on a model. Use that last bit of time to really focus on your renders and show that off. I'm not a massive fan of seeing just plain textures on their own
Hmm.
in the portfolio. I actually like to see renders where you're showing off those details.
Okay.
There's a couple of examples on some of mine where I've used height to use on like raised ink on keys, for example, just to show off of like I thought about this detail. So I've done a render specifically for that. You as the graduate, show me what you can do. Show off a little bit. If you thought about these details, show those details off in your render.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you. We have a few more questions, but let's leave them maybe to the end,
Yeah.
and you can get stuck into these. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, that sounds good. I've got a fair bit to get through, but I'm excited. There's a lot of cool stuff.
Nice.
So all of this is in no particular order. Roxy was nice enough to sort of categorize everyone. So I think I'm starting with, I think students and people looking for work. And then I think there's people already in the industry at the end. So you'll probably see a bit of a varied amount of feedback there. I also use what I call a percentage system. So say, for example, if you're like quite new to modeling and let's say 100% is the most perfect asset ever, if you're say like 20-30% of the way there, I'll give you more general feedback to help you with that last 70%. If your model is like 90%, it's absolutely amazing, I'll give 10% feedback where I'm being really picky, really nitty gritty about the details and stuff. So if anything seems super harsh, don't take that as an insult. It's, your work's really, really good. Let's just dig into the finer details of the piece. So first up, we have Jamie. Jamie has this lovely piece here. This one instantly gripped my attention. I love the warm colours. I think it's really well balanced by sort of the emerald greens in the water. I like how you've used that sort of white edge highlights just to break up those materials and those colours. I think you've done that really. I also love that you've done a video. First off, I love seeing videos. I love all the little like details you've done in the background to like show wind. You've got some sort of like cloth going on here. You've instantly shown me that you've thought about this as a wider piece in a game environment. A player's coming through here. It needs to have life. I love seeing that. So if we come down to here, you showed off. Yeah, this is great. I love seeing your process and seeing how you are as an artist. This vertex blending, it shows your capable skills, shows your understanding of how this is going to work in a game engine. This is exactly what I'd want to see. I also really love seeing your materials. I think I would have liked to have maybe seen these renders a little bit bigger, sorry. Maybe a light going over them just to show off those details. I don't know if you've necessarily got any specific roughness details in there or the little height details here, but it'd be great just to see a light going over those, just to bring out those details that you put in there, because it clearly seems like you've put a lot in there. So overall sort of composition is really nice, but I actually noticed this as I'm going through this one here. You've leaned very heavily over to the right, and you can see here you were thinking a lot about left. You made a great decision by adding this in here, but then when you're adding all of your props, I'll go over this so it's not moving all the time. You've added tons more props over onto the right, and we're getting a little bit bare over on the left here. Even where you've sort of added lights in later, they're getting slightly obscured over here. You kind of maybe want something just over here just to sort of complete that piece a little bit more. So going on to this one, I love that bin. That bin has so much weight to it. I love the silhouette. Like I was talking about the angles earlier. The angles down here are really nice. The little like cut-ins here, even the slope down here. This is all really nice. I love weighty sort of pieces like this. The only thing is the dirt doesn't quite seem as consistent of the rest of your props. You got like little speckles and stuff on here, which is really nice. But then there's nothing really on here on these sort of pieces. So I'd sort of go a little bit more consistent with that. Either decide you're going to have everything with a little bit of dirt on, or don't at all. Um, I also love these tiles, these chunky tiles. I absolutely love this. I think this sort of style you've got here with these nice chunky little features here all give off a great silhouette, all give off a good weight to the piece. Even here, look at these nice chunks here. These look great. However, I'd want you to focus on sort of where the pallets you've got here. You've got very, very thin planks. I want you to chunk those up like you have here with the tiles, or like with these sort of here. This bit here just feels you could just chunk those up a little bit more to keep consistent. So I mentioned at the beginning, I like the color palettes you've got. But I think it was in this render here. So this render, you've got some really nice oranges popping through. You've got a very consistent color palette. You're bringing out some areas here where you've got some nice color. You're drawing the iron. Just on this render here, you seem to have lost this just a little bit. These are starting to get a little bit more desaturated, getting more into the yellows and the beige. Just want to get that color back into the piece that you've got here. This is really nice. Just make sure it's consistent across the whole piece. And then finally, I'd love to see some wireframes and UVs on the props. They look really, really well optimized, but I just want to see that. I want you to show me that you've thought about all of this. So that's Jamie's. Thank you very much, Jamie. Next up. Next up, we have Paulina. I think you've messaged me before. I'm sure I've seen this before. So I had a look at your dining room. You've already mentioned this in here on the side, but yeah, you need some sort of fill lighting in here. You need to sort of fill the scene with light. You just start with a main light that fills the scene. You know, get everything well lit, get everything shown off. Then you can start to go back down, getting it darker, getting those harsher shadows in. Like I like the harsh shadows that you got incoming in here, but do that sort of after. You know, get those props lit up well, and then you can start adding in smaller lights to start visually building up the space. So back one, there's your teacups. So I mentioned there was a nice start to the materials, but I just want to see some of the finer details. If this is sort of like a porcelain type material, I expect it to be a light amount of surface noise, some very fine cracks all over. There are always very fine cracks all over it, and a slightly smoother surface too, just where the light's hitting here. I'd expect that just to be a little bit more glossy, just to pick up that material. And then also, I just asked the question like of the metal. Is the metal maybe like painted on? If so, you'd have some remnants of that material coming through, or is this more of like a brass type material? And if so, I'd expect just a little bit more surface noise. You can see here where the light's hitting, you're just getting a very clean band of light. You just want to break that up ever so slightly with those very sort of subconscious minor details. Just here you can see it's just sort of hitting very hard. It's making it look quite flat. And then I use more space on your renders. You know, zoom in a little bit. Show me more of your composition. You know, you've got a lot of blank space all around the edges here. Zoom in, show those off. And likewise, you know, if you're rendering in, I wasn't sure what you're rendering in, but try and get a wireframe on top of this model as well. Apart from, you know, instead of just getting a screenshot from whatever modeling package you use, and show it off in your model. Maybe show it side by side, fill up that space a little bit more. And then finally, just on your UVs, I think this is the area you could probably improve the most quite quickly. You know, you've got a lot of space here, a lot of space here. Instantly, I just think one of these two shapes here can maybe just be shrunk down ever so slightly. Just in here, you're not going to lose much textile density at all. It won't be noticeable. Same with this one. Just pop it in here. And instantly, you've probably improved your textile density by about 50% easily. You'll have way more space to play about with there. And then you maybe want to instead just have these all on the same UV sheet. Yeah, same with these. Have them all on the same UV sheet. It looks like you can probably overlay some of these shells as well. They look very identical, and you've got a very consistent pattern, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. I'd overlay those shells, save yourself some space, and put them all on one UV set. You know, they're all props that will probably be seen together. And then finally, there was the dining table and dining cabinet. I think, let me have a look for, yes. There's just some areas on here where you seem to have quite a lot of geometry where it doesn't really seem to be doing much on the silhouette. At this point, I kind of argue, are they even needed there? Because you've got some faceted edges just along here, so you could better off using the geometry just on here instead on these much larger curves rather than under here where it isn't necessarily going to be seen by the player. And again, same with the UVs. There's a lot here that you can probably just share. I'm not sure if you unwrapped one leg and then reused them all and rotated, but if you haven't, that's maybe something you should look at. And again, you've got very consistent patterns, so you can save a lot of UV space by just repeating those along. You know, treat it like a kind of a mini trim sheet, if you like, for your asset. And then just on this, I would probably unwrap this just to sort of like one quite larger piece of the leg with one UV seam down at the back there, rather than having to do multiple UV shells. So that was Paulina. Thank you very much for that. So next one. Oh yeah, this was cool. I remember this. So straight away, I was instantly drawn to the staff because of the colours. You drew my attention to it. But immediately, the first thing that stuck out is change the background colour. Go for like a darker grey or like a darkish blue or whatever. Make your asset pop from the background. You know, tone down that colour. The pink and the purple was overpowering the whole asset. You know, you've got a really nice asset here, but it's being overpowered by the background. So the textures and the colors are lovely. I love the leaves you've done. I love the gradients you've done on there. I also really love the stone in the middle. I think you did another render. Yeah, the stone is really nice. I love sort of the edge highlights you picked up there. It's kind of almost got like a real thickness to it. Like there's a lot of depth inside of that crystal. I really like that, and I think you could probably apply that more to sort of these sort of pieces here. These sort of like bluer rocks there. I think you can maybe push that more into these. Make these stand out just as much as this does, because this looks really nice. And then I'm not, if this is your low poly mesh, I'd say you could probably optimize a little bit more. I mean, you got a lot of geometry going on in the skull, which is just about fine. It's always going to, but there's a lot here where nothing's really happening on the silhouette that you can probably lose and optimize a little bit more. Same with the leaves. The leaves have got a ton of polys in there you probably don't need. It kind of looks like it's just been retopoed quickly from ZBrush. So I want to see sort of like your thought process behind that. Show you've got an eye for optimization on your model as a more rounded artist. But I really love the breakdowns. I love seeing your shader breakdowns. This is fantastic. I love seeing the concepts that you're working from. I always love to see that artists can work well from concepts. But overall, I think this is a really nice piece. I think it's just a few more things to show off your model. It will take it to the next level. And then this one, yeah, I really like this one. Instantly, I just love the story and the atmosphere already. Your breakdowns and your reasonings are really good. It's nice to see. I think it was the texture breakdowns as well. Yes, how you've using different UV maps on, how you've broken it down. I think that's really good. Shows a lot of thought process behind it, which is something I really wanted to see. Shows you as an artist. Shows that you're not just creating art. You're really thinking about the process, and you're showing me that process as well. Let's have a look. So I actually really like the style. I love the details that you've included in here. I think it was this leg here that I really liked. This has got a nice weight and texture and detail to it. All of this detail is really nice. Like, keep that up. This is going to a really good piece. And then sort of the overall composition. Again, I'm getting that atmosphere. I'm getting that story from it. I think there was one with the can. So this one, I would have maybe just rotated the scene ever so slightly to get more of the body of the dinosaur in, because you've got a lot of empty space here where not too much is going on. A lot of it's heavily focused on here. I'd maybe just get this, so this is coming more into the center, showing that off even more. So your textures as well. The one thing I noticed is when you're tiling, you're getting a lot of repeating tiling details in there, too much than you should usually. But as a quick sort of, I think you're on time constraints, or you're giving yourself some time constraints. One easy way to do this, you've already created a load of like streamers and balloons. Start using those more. Maybe add some like posters or signs, whatever you've done. Add those in there if you want a quick way to break all of this sort of repeating detail up, because you've already made these assets. That'll save you some. Or add more doors in wherever it is, just to break those up where you've got large areas of the wall where you can really see those repeating tiling textures. And then finally, I'd have liked to have seen a little bit more on the light. The general lighting is fine. I'd have liked to have seen maybe some like museum spotlights or something, just to highlight these balloons you've got up here. they do get a little bit lost up in the scene. I kind of want to see the light reflecting off them, the very shiny, bright objects. Draw the attention to that. Draw the player's eye up to the ceiling. You can use this with the streamers. Draw their eye up to the ceiling. But overall, I really like this piece. You're really starting to show sort of the story to it, the atmosphere to it, and that's really, really nice. And again, some fantastic assets here. I don't go through absolutely everything for this portfolio review just because I know there's so many people to get through. I love seeing the modular kits. Always love seeing this. This instantly just ticks a load of boxes of like, yes, they can work with modular assets, which is absolutely vital in a game production. And again, love seeing your planning, all of this. Absolutely brilliant on that. So thank you very much. So next up, we have Michael. Yeah, this is a cool portfolio. I like this one. So this one was one I looked at first. Instantly, stunning colours and balance. The use of your yellows and the oranges to call out the detail and focus well just over here. Done really, really well. Excellent silhouette on the bricks as well that I noticed, just as they're coming out here on the side. This is really, really nice. I like the lines that you're generating up here. And you're calling this out really well with the extra brick detail there. I actually said that you've got another shot down here. I'd move this up. This is kind of buried all the way down here. You're already looking through here, and then by that point, you're kind of already wanting to go up. Bring some of these really good screenshots back up. Same with this one. This is really, really good. I mentioned this in a couple of portfolios before, but I love seeing these sort of details. You've got the leaves there, you've got the wind going on there, you've got the leaves going in the background. Bring that up. Show that me straight away. Don't hide them down the bottom. At the bottom, you want sort of like your wireframes and your breakdowns and your processes. Bring those up because it's clearly a highlighted asset, and I just want to see your technical ability on that too. I would have also liked to see sort of a wireframe or something going on this sort of hero prop. Again, it looks really well optimized, but just prove to me that it is. Show off your work even more because this looks great. I really, really like this. And then also, I think you had some materials. Yep. Got a load of materials here. I'd also potentially say break this out into a separate project in your art station just to show some more focus on that. Again, really depends what sort of thing you're going into the industry. If you want to focus more on sort of materials or anything like that, maybe break that off so it doesn't get lost in here and someone can instantly just look at your materials. And this one was really hard to critique, but I'd actually like some more views and renders of this. Really show off your work, show it off from the different angles. You're really getting there. It just needs that final bit. But again, really, really, really nice portfolio. And then this one was probably my favorite of the two. This has got everything. This has got a great silhouette, great lines. You're instantly grabbing my attention. I wrote that it's a stunning environment, so much weight and style, even to each modular piece, as their own sort of assets. Like they have so much life, just they're not even put together yet. So fantastic technical ability. There was one piece just here. So obviously you've reused a lot of the pillars and the posts. I just think here you've obviously resized it, and a lot of the detail you've included has maybe gotten too big now and doesn't quite fit in for the rest of it. A lot of these you've got much more smooth surfaces, and even on these panels here, you haven't got too much detail. Here, at the correct scale, seems about right, but as you've scaled this up quite large, it's kind of become a bit too much, and that's maybe where I break it up with maybe some signs or whatever. Maybe moving the sign in front. Hiding that detail if you can, because obviously you've thought about sort of saving yourself some time and reusing that, but sometimes you have to be a little bit more clever about that and hiding certain details. But in general, I put incredibly technically gifted. I think it's a really, really fantastic piece. And then finally, you did a piece on the frag launcher. Yeah, so this is cool. But the main thing that stood out for me was the metal. You've got a lot of like nice sculpted soft detail here. I just think the metal, especially around sort of like here, is just getting a little bit too soft. I'd want just some of those edges just be a bit harder, a bit sharper. And then in general, just the colors of the metal, you've got quite a lot of the same tone going on. A lot of them all sort of blending together. Your browns and your oranges are really, really nice. They sit really well together where you've got the leather and you've got the wood. I just think you can maybe just add a little bit more variance into the colors of the metals here. maybe go. I sometimes had a very slight touch of like a yellow or an orange, maybe going more into the sort of nickel kind of territory, just to bring together that warm color palette that you've already established on some of them, and just break up a couple of the pieces here. You've got a lot of the same sort of color you've got going on there. And I love love all this leather detail going on here. This is really really nice. And then again, this is a lovely render, showing off all your details. You've got a nice light coming in here, highlighting all the edges, showing off all of your detail. Really, really good. And I would have liked to have just seen, I think it was a wireframe. Yeah, there isn't a wireframe. There is if you go into the model viewer. And I will quickly just show this one. So just on here, your inner cylinder here, exactly the same number of sides as the one on the outside, and it's just starting to get faceted from a couple of angles. So just be careful, try not to fall into that trap. Give yourself a little bit more detail around these edges just to finish off this piece. But again, really fantastic portfolio, very, very strong. And I keep that up. I think you're looking for work or whatever, but hopefully that won't be for too long because it's really impressive. So next up is Daniel. Daniel's piece here. This was cool. So I instantly noted that it's a beautiful material on the skip. Love the rust and the damage, especially here where you've got the chain swinging, and you've got that exact sort of like rust detail in there. Really, really nice. Love seeing that straight away. Notice it straight away. Renders are really nice, not too soft. I quite like the soft white light you've got coming from the right hand side. Fills the scene nicely. The only thing I'd suggest maybe, especially on this one, is maybe just a light at the back. Coming forward, highlighting some of these edges here, just to bring it away from the background you've got there, just so it doesn't get too muddled. Just pick up some of those edge highlights right at the back, and just lifts that asset a little bit more. The only thing I'd like to see more, because I think you mentioned that the trash bags were done in Marvelous Design. I'd kind of like to know a little bit more about your process there. Show that off a little bit more. You know, what's your workflow going through that? You know, show off how you're using those workflows in your artwork. That would have been really, really nice. And then the only thing just on the trash bag material themselves, I'm not sure if they're maybe just a little bit too noisy, but they don't just sit as right as the material you've got in the skip. Maybe the light's just getting broken up a little bit too much. And just on this render here, I just noticed that the blue ones are looking very like soft and rough. They don't quite seem to have the same sort of like roughness that you're getting over here, and they stick out a little bit because you've done such a fantastic job on the materials on here. These ones here are just sticking out a little bit much. Maybe they need to be a little bit glossier or shinier, or maybe there's something going on there. Maybe you need another light to call them out, to get the reflections, to get the shine in there. So I do that. And then finally, I think it was on these ones here. Let me see if there's another. Yeah. So the material, the asset you've got here, the proportions are all very similar, but you've just scaled down. I would have said maybe do another one where you've got a half-filled bag and the top of it is collapsed in, just to mix it up, because they're just very proportionally the same. It just looks very obvious that something's been scaled down and doesn't quite sit right. But that's getting a little bit nitpicky. But that's because overall, you know, it's a really fantastic piece. It looks great. And yeah, keep that up. I want to see more of this. I want to see more here up to that sort of standard. So thank you very much. How are we doing for time? We okay?
Yeah, we're doing fine.
Not doing too bad. Cool. So Nyla, let's have a look at the old desk. Overall scene composition, really nice. Clear focus on the book you've got there. Nice to see a couple of lighting scenarios, and also some of the dust particles. Again, another great video. Dust particles in there is a nice touch. I think I prefer the softer nighttime lighting. It's showing off your assets more here. Maybe the lighting here and the shadows are a little bit too harsh and are obscuring some of your assets here. I really like the wall on the behind, the detail you've got there, the paint chipping. You can see it sort of in the background here. Love the paint chipping and the peeling. Looks really natural. Looks nice and high res as well. But there's a few assets. Sort of the large photo frame here, I noticed, is getting a little bit blurry. It doesn't quite seem to have sort of the same texture resolution as the backgrounds and some of the other props. There's no real sort of like definite grain you've got on there in the wood. Like you've got a lot going on here with the wood grain. on these shelves, but it's not coming through on this one. This one just instantly stuck out just because the light's hitting it straight away. It's drawing its attention there. And maybe just some of the edges just seem a little bit too harsh. Maybe just want to soften them up a touch. Also liked the subsurface on the candles. Thought that looked great. Looks really good in that lighting scenario you've got. One suggestion to sort of push that further is maybe looking at the subsurface on these sort of like, I think they're like parchment scrolls or whatever. You've got a light source quite close to them, so you can have those lit up a little bit more. They will grab some of the light from there. They're obviously very thin sort of assets, so you can enhance it further by applying that subsurface more onto those sort of thinner assets where you've got that light source coming on. They just look a little bit too sort of, they stick out a little bit there, a little bit flat. So you just want a bit of that subsurface going on in that one. The knife. I like the shapes and the silhouette of this asset. There was a nice weight to the handle. I wanted to touch on the wireframe a little. There's a couple of spots where it was getting a little bit wonky. There's some areas here where you've also got an N-gon going on here, but just some of the areas here, just the curve isn't quite following around as neatly along the whole way. A little bit over here as well. I just go in there, touch that up a little bit, get that a little bit straighter, a little bit cleaner. Also, a few of the edge loops could have been merged, like even the edge loop here where you got the N-gon. Those could have just been merged together. Same here. It's not really going to affect too much, but it'll just make your topology a little bit cleaner. And likewise here, just be careful. You've got a load of tiny little triangles here that might cause you some rendering issues, especially here and here. Loads and loads of tiny triangles, especially when you spaced it out so well. And I think here as well, I'm not sure if that's necessarily where topology is or if it's just on the render. But it seems like there's a lot of small triangles there that are causing that. And yeah, they will cause you issues in the future. So next up, the old water pump. This was cool. Love the render on this. Love the colors. This just instantly grabbed my attention. Such a great render. So much contrast in there. Nice balance as well. Like the dirt coming up from the ground onto the pipe. Love the animation on the bucket you did. Just a little swing on there, a little bit of water. Love that. Brings it to life. Has so much nice charm in there as well. And the grass as well is nice. But I just be careful. I'm not sure if you've done this and like you've vertex painted the animation on, but just try and do it just on the top there because you've got all the grass moving at the bottom. Maybe just blend that a little bit just so the tops are just moving, not so much the bottom, because at the minute they're kind of all like swishing around in there in the mud. The detail on the metal is nice. I'm not sure if it's a touch too realistic for the fact that you've said it's a stylized one. Maybe it's a little bit too much. Maybe you want to soften that detail down. And then if you're going for something more stylized, maybe exaggerate one of the proportions somewhere. Maybe you've got a much more chunkier handle on the end here. Maybe the pipe at the end here is exaggerated a little bit more. If you look back, there was the saxophone example I gave before where they've just exaggerated one small piece, still retains the silhouette, still looks exactly the way you want to, but you've just exaggerated key features. That's how I'd improve that. I put good topology on the bucket. Where's the wireframe? I'm sure there was a wireframe. Dun, dun, dun. Well, I've got notes on the wireframe. I noticed there was certainly some areas, just in these areas here, where your topology wasn't quite balanced. You had a lot of topology, and I remember in these areas and these areas, where you could have just balanced those out a little bit more on your cylinders. Also, some of the cylinders on the front of the pipe here were a little bit off. The edges around here especially could have just been a bit more equal to each other. I definitely remember on the very top they were quite spaced out and they were quite close together as you're getting down here. Just balance those out a little bit more. Yeah, really good. I really like this piece. Really, really good. I'd definitely use this as a piece to continue from. So the next three examples, these are the last three. I thought these were just absolutely fantastic. I think these are the three that are already in industry. So you can definitely take a lot of inspiration from these. First up is Nathan. So I had a look at the flamethrower first. Love the chunkiness to some aspects on it. Yeah, I love the chunky all of this looks really, really good. I love the weight to that. The only area that I'd want to improve is sort of the casing here, the sort of little straps here. I'd maybe want to chunk those up, thicken those up. They're just like you've done it on this piece here, where they are a little bit thicker, but I would just go further on this just to balance that piece out, especially here. It's looking a little bit thin compared to sort of the details you've got here. Chunk those up nicely. And then I'd maybe go where you've got the tape here, where it's looking a little bit jagged here. Maybe just model that in. Model that onto your pipe, especially if you're going for something stylized. You're allowed to exaggerate those details, call those details out. I would have just modeled those in, got a nice little texture on like the wrapping or the tape or whatever it is, and push that further. Just on UVs, you've got a lot of space, a lot of padding in between. I feel like you can make some savings here. There's a couple of areas where maybe a lot of these smaller pieces, especially up here, can start to fit around here. I sort of estimated you get maybe 5 to 10% more textile density. It's getting a little bit picky, but just to improve your UVs further, especially where you may be getting some jagged edges and you need some more resolution in there. I'd look at that first, of where you can pull that resolution from. So then I looked at this isolated farm. So I loved the individual renders of the props you get on here. Love the color. This is really popping, especially here. Really, really popping color. But I feel like that color gets a little bit lost in your final renders. They're not as popping, especially because you've referenced some concept art as well. I think you've included it at the bottom. Yeah. Look at how he's using the colors. He's instantly dragging your eyes up here. Nice bright colors. Very well balanced with like the blues and like going into sort of like the emerald greens and into the browns as you're going down, dulling down the color as you go down. I'd just like to see that more in your piece. These examples show off that color, but just those first few pieces that I'm seeing, those are the ones don't necessarily have that color that I'd kind of be expecting from that. And then stylized car was another one that grabbed my attention. Yeah, this is cool. The only thing I say here is splitting UVs up. You've got a very, very densely packed UV set here. I think this, if this was in sort of like a game production, I think you'd start having issues where you're mip mapping because they're so closely, tightly packed. You're going to have issues at lower resolutions. I'd just break it up, especially on something like a vehicle. You can afford to break those UV sets up more. You're still getting a lot of texture resolution out of here, but I'd kind of want to see how you could cope with sort of like a much lower texture resolution. I think you'd start to get issues. So I'd just like to see that broken up, a little bit of an eye on the focus. But overall silhouette and everything like that, that's a really cool piece. I really like that. And there was one final piece. This is just because I absolutely love Game Boys. Just your proportions on this. The Game Boy is just too thin, just instantly stuck out like a sore thumb for me. Needs to be a lot fatter. I've got one right next to me. They're big, chunky boys. So just look at your proportions on that. Same with the sort of spreaker grill on the front. There should be a little bit more detail there, similar to how you've done the back, where it looks like there's a bit more depth. Needs to be a bit more there than just the harsh blacks that you've got there. So just be careful on your proportions there. It does stick out like a sore thumb. But yeah, otherwise, another great portfolio. You might want to start looking at culling down in future, but you're already in industry. So again, when you're in industry, you start to have tons of portfolio pieces and it doesn't matter as much. But it's something just to look at. Next up, we have Melissa. This was, wow, what a portfolio. This is just exceptional. In terms of when I say you need to grab my attention within 10 to 15 seconds, this is it. This is the one for me. Beautiful all over. I didn't even know where to begin, where I wanted to start looking at. I'm not going to critique your vegetation as much. It's something that I've not had tons of experience in, not recently anyway. But I just wanted to highlight sort of your colors, your color theory, your color palettes that you're using. Here, absolutely beautiful gradients and browns and reds. They're all sitting within that family. I mean, like the moss and stuff is just incredible. I can't do this sort of stuff, so this is like magic to me. But absolutely beautiful. Again, there was the Christmas project. I wanted to highlight one of the soft toys you did. This is probably the best example I've ever seen of this kind of felt type material, and like the lines you got in the normals here are just absolutely beautiful. Just an example, if there's any sort of students or anyone in here looking, this is really fantastic. I'd say maybe the details in sort of the felt have been a little bit exaggerated, but I think that brings it more together. It feels more believable. You know, you're allowed to exaggerate some details just to draw attention and draw focus to them. Really, really fantastic. There was one very picky criticism. It was on one of your cacti. If I go down to the wireframe, this one, just on these smaller areas here, I think you could have just lowered the detail down here. Seems to get a little bit wasted as we get into the very top compared to especially one of these. I don't know if you just created one and duplicated it across. That's more than likely what I would have done anyway. Very, very nitpicky, just slightly too high compared to the rest. Again, I want to see wireframes on all of your props for the most part. I think you're showing it on the vast majority of stuff. I think that's mostly because some of these pieces are going on 3-4 years old. Which I maybe you want to start culling some of these older projects as like you're clearly improving as you're getting on. And there's a couple of like more realistic pieces compared to stylized. I mean, it might not be a case for this, but for other people, you might just want to start focusing on one or the other, tailoring and coloring your portfolio. But man, what a fantastic portfolio! There was some just amazing stuff in this one. I actually wanted to highlight the cauldron. I wanted to check because you've got kind of some banding or some faceting. I'd love to know if this was intentional because I know like iron cauldrons at the time were like hand hammered and stuff. So I wasn't sure if you've intentionally included that sort of detail or not. But again, love that. And then there was just a note just on the pumpkin. I just want to sharpen up these details here. Just getting a tiny bit soft compared to the rest of it. I just want to sharpen up those edges just a tiny, tiny bit. Again, I'm being super, super picky. That's because it's such a fantastic portfolio. Absolutely brilliant. Just love it. And I think I also noted just to sharpen up the wood grain edges ever so slightly. You've got some nice sharp edges and sharp details all over. Just to sharpen these up just a touch on the edge. Again, really, really fantastic. And then lastly, the final one was Morgan's. The first comment I put was I was wondering if you ever played the game Control. This has given me so many vibes of your portfolio. I love Control, absolutely beautiful art style. Again, I'm getting a lot of vibes from that. So the radio piece first. I thought there could be a slightly better balancing of the topology you've done here. If I go up to the back, I would have modeled in some of these details here. Again, this could be like more of a clutter prop, so you wouldn't, but just for portfolio's sake, would have modeled in sort of the power sockets and sort of some of these. You've got, I think, 8 edges I counted on this one. It's getting a little bit low. You can afford to go a little bit higher on that. And it will help break up this quite flat back edge here. I really like how the screen was rendered here in this. Really caught my eye. Nice amount of glow and the dust on there. One minor critique, because I've made the exact same. You can see it in my portfolio on the TVA computer where I've used a normal map to show like a grill. I don't know if it's going to come through on here, but the dirt you've used for this top grill piece is coming through onto the bottom. Obviously, if this was all modeled in, that dirt wouldn't be the exact same. So just be careful of that. It kind of makes the piece look a little bit more flat. I'd remove the dirt from those gaps or maybe vary it up a little bit more on there. Then just on one of these here where you zoomed right in, it just seems you've got some very harsh, hard edges just coming through here. I don't know if that's just on the render. You can't really see it on these other pieces where the light's hitting it. I was just unsure if there's an error here where you're getting a really hard edge where like a seam is or something like that. But it just seems very noticeable up close. And then just on sort of like the Dymo labels you've done here, I just pushed the height a little bit more. Maybe you can use like a bevel filter in Substance just to add a little bit more thickness to these numbers, just to call them out a little bit more. And then also just on the plastic on the buttons. This is when I was working with Lego, but plastic like this in the middle gets like microscopically thinner and just ever so slightly starts to dip. That's where you get quite a nice sort of a nice gloss right in the middle of that plastic. That's just where the plastic's just starting to get thinner and dipping. I sometimes use like a curvature map, invert it to get the inside, blur it, and then use a height straight down just to create that effect on plastics like that. That might be something you want to look at. And again, love seeing your processes, love seeing all this tech stuff. I love doing stuff in Illustrator of stuff like this. Love seeing that. And again, love seeing the color palettes, the thought, the process behind it is really, really good. Experiments in time. Wow. I put just wow. What a stunning project. the renders are so beautiful and full of life and atmosphere. Beautiful assets. I think in general you've gone for a much more hero asset style poly count, so I'm not going to critique that too much. But I think some of the Ys on this one, like 32,000 tries, are absolutely killing you. You can maybe cut down on some of these very small areas here. Overall topology on this though is very nice. Again, it looks like maybe there's too much detail in there than you need, but you know that's getting a little bit picky on how you can optimize. I thought the fruit was maybe a little bit too high for what it is, at like nearly 3,000 tries each. The reason I say that is just because you've got one down here where I think you've got like 10, 20 of them in a basket together. That's suddenly adding up to like 50, 60,000 verts all in one. They're in here somewhere, but that was just an eye on optimization for that. But I like seeing the variations as well. Just a note on one of the retro computers you've got. I just wanted to see some surface level details. It was on this one, just to break up where you've got these really, really clean surfaces here. Just a little bit of grime or noise or something on there, just to break it up. It's kind of all sort of merging into one there. Just a little bit of breaking that up in there. The light fixture, again, because you've got a very high poly count, I would say you can just add a little bit more in here where you're starting to get this faceting in here. You know, you've afforded a lot of poly count over the whole model. Just areas here, just a little bit of focus on those. Again, it's a wall prop, so maybe you don't need as much in general. But again, I mean, just stunning project overall. Like, I love all of this detail, this paint chip in here, and all like the radial details you've got here of like the chipping and the cracking. Absolutely amazing. Love this. This whole, I think you did this for like a game jam type thing. Really, really, really cool. Loving the details here. Love your renders. This is a piece where if I saw this in the portfolio, again, rigging as well, like amazing. This is a really like selling yourself piece of like what I can do. Again, you thought of like color variations on the fly, absolutely amazing. Modular kits, absolutely amazing. Love the details in here, even like the very, very surface details of where you're breaking up the light. I think I mentioned that earlier of how you're breaking up the light on some other portfolios. This is exactly it. Just those very, very tiny details are just making that piece seem so much better, so much more real. And then finally, I just looked at the shark. Shark's so cool. I love the surface definition you've got on here of that kind of like really hard sculpted look. Very, very, very cool. And I actually think you could afford more polys in this one. You're starting to get a little bit of facet in here. I think there was a render here of the silhouette here. I just afford yourself a little bit more, push that a little bit further. But overall, this is a stunning render. Absolutely love it. So much charm to the piece. Again, a really, really fantastic example of like showing what you can do. And all of the details here, just absolutely brilliant. Just wanted to highlight that piece as something really, really good. I think that's the last piece. That's the last one. Yeah, that's
Awesome.
it.
Chris, that was incredible. Like
That felt like a bit of a sprint. I'm very sorry, but
no, that was amazing. There's so much useful information, like insight and explanation and exploration of like, things to look out for and just
yeah,
considerations to make when you're like thinking about presenting your work. Like I was just even just myself picking up different bits and pieces. So I really appreciate you taking the time and putting the effort into doing that, man. It's very, very much appreciated. We have a few more questions, if that's okay with you. Just from before.
yeah, as many as you want. Just
Uh,
reading the chat, Chris has like 50 Game Boys. That is true. If you're gonna
uh,
make a Game Boy, don't bother showing it to me. I have every variation in my little cabinet here.
wow. Okay. Remove Game Boys from portfolios if they're going to Chris.
Yes, yes.
Uh,
This is amazing.
Going back to, oh my god, we're back to like 7:15 in the chat. So Melissa, what if I just can't decide if I should go stylized or not? What can help
Um,
me to find clarity? So I guess this is the age-old question of, do I do
yeah.
realism? Do I do stylized? Where does that come from?
So, I mean, it's going to sound hypocritical because even if you go into my portfolio, like I've done a lot of hyperrealism in my own time, and then professionally, I've kind of just fallen into stylized a lot more. Not really through choice, just it just happened. I think it depends what kind of point of the career you're at, but I would just keep going with both for now and see which one just feels more natural to you. You will just get to a point where it will just start to click more. Just keep experimenting more. Just challenge yourself. Pick something even harder if it's in stylized or if it's in hyper realistic. Pick something even harder to challenge yourself with and really refine those skills. And it might just be a case of you're like, okay, I'm finding this one easier than the other, and that will sometimes just make the choice for you. It is very, very hard, and sometimes it might just be out of your hand, and you'll get a job that's stylized, and then you're with that going forward. I know that's not a very specific answer, um, but it's a case of yeah, I just challenge yourself and see what comes naturally to you.
Yeah, I guess
That's
it's
the
fair to
best I can
say.
offer.
Yeah, I know students even of my own that, with me would have been very realistic, and then they end up going to a studio, and
Yeah,
a lot of the work they do is just stylized. It just sort of happens that way. So that can
yeah. Like
definitely
I'm,
happen.
I'm very stylized now, but I keep up massively with hyperrealism.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah.
cool. Okay. Also from Melissa, what is your opinion on explaining yourself? By that she means the cover letter or CV, especially
Oh
when
yeah.
you're a little bit older and you've started later or late with your 3D journey.
I mean, like being late on your three, like I'm very laid back, so I'm not bothered when you started your 3D journey. You know, it doesn't bother me in the slightest. Like I want to hire you for your skills, you as an artist, you as your experiences, see what you're bringing to the table, and that's what you should convey in your cover letter. I had some fantastic cover letters when I was doing my last hiring lot. That was just like selling yourself as an artist. Like, what are you going to bring to my team? You know, what are your experiences? What are your skills? Just show me that passion in that cover letter. You can in your CV, you can list off. I can use Maya, I can use Blender, I can use Substance. You can tick all those off in your cover letter. Really sell yourself as a person. Doesn't if anyone judges you for when you started as in the industry or anything like that, like just sack them off. Don't bother with them. It's completely irrelevant. It's not important. I want to see you for your art. I'm not bothered about little things like that. So I wouldn't ever let that put you down. Just go for it. Go really would just say go for it.
Yeah, let the art speak for itself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Question from Paulina. For a student that is only starting out with modeling and texturing, should they focus on individual props, even if they are pursuing environment art for portfolio's sake and internship applications?
Yes. Focus on the smaller props. The reason I say that is because you can very quickly iterate on your work, get those basic fundamentals down, and you as an artist can start finishing pieces off a lot quicker. That's actually why one of the reasons I fell into prop art. I was traditionally an environment artist, but I just loved finishing pieces off quicker, getting through things quicker, all that sort of stuff. That's how I fell into prop art. So I'd suggest that as someone starting off, find a piece that you love, an asset you love, finish that off, evaluate it yourself, and go, oh, I'd kind of like to do more. There were some of my pieces I wanted to incorporate screens more, so I did a project of a Game Boy retail kiosk with a screen on, and I used that as the challenge for that prop. I learned more from that, and then the next asset I do, I pick another thing to focus on. So you do that and build your skills up with an environment you can get bogged down very quickly, and you're like, oh, I've got 20, 30 more assets to fill this scene out, and you can suddenly the scope can just expand. So for me, start small, build your skills up, then get bigger and bigger and bigger. Even as an environment artist, you can just focus on, say, materials and substance designer, little experiments, little tasks like that. Is my advice to you.
Cool. I think that's it. I hope I haven't missed anyone. There was a lot of discussion tonight, which is really, really good to
That's
see.
cool.
So you sparked a lot
I'll
of,
uh, I'll
yeah,
have a read through that.
I
I
did.
hope everyone enjoyed it anyway.
Yeah, it was amazing. And just to say to everyone as well, obviously thank you to Chris for taking the time to do it, but just thank you to everyone who put their portfolio forward. It's not always easy to get critique and feedback on your work, particularly with lots of other people watching and stuff. So just to say well done to everyone. The quality was amazing, right across from
Yeah, it
the
really
student
was.
work. Yeah, right
Yeah.
the way through to the people who are in industry. So it was really, really cool to see that. Um, thanks, Chris. I was just thanking you for your, yeah, that was amazing, Chris. It was really, really cool.
Yeah, that was loads of fun. Um, See you tomorrow, Roxy. Yeah,
Roxy, see
Roxy
you
gets the
tomorrow.
real feedback. Roxy gets the Roxy doesn't get the nice stuff.
Oh,
It's be like, look at slide 8, my presentation, circles. Study it.
there you go.
Nah,
That's your feedback.
Roxy's
That's my
fantastic.
homework.
No, we have a lot of fun at work. It's good fun.
Cool.
And likewise, hit me up on socials. My DMs are always open. If you've, I think a few of you I've already spoken to before. If you have general queries about the industry anytime, I'm open to chat basically all the time. I absolutely love teaching people, sharing my knowledge, all that sort of stuff. So please don't hesitate to do that.
That's
Um,
amazing, Chris. Chris's socials are in chat. I think Joe's just shared them again. So if anybody isn't following Chris, or wants to reach out, take him up on his very kind offer. His Twitter and his ArtStation are there for people to drop him a follow. You're gonna get pinged by loads of people now, Chris. You're gonna get loads of
Oh,
messages.
I do anyway. You should
Oh, you do anyway.
I do love them. I
You're
can't
gonna
get
get
enough.
more. You're gonna get even more.
I'm the worst.
But yeah, that was amazing, man. I'm going to stop the recording there. That was really, really good.